He had been looking forward to the holidays for months, but now that December had arrived, excitement he once felt seemed to vanish with the winter chill. The city was decorated with sparkling lights, wreaths hung on doors, and every window seemed to glow with warmth and cheer. Yet for him, the beauty of the season only highlighted the emptiness he felt. He walked through the busy streets, passing people who carried shopping bags, children who laughed and ran ahead of their parents, and couples holding hands. He felt like an invisible ghost. Moving among the celebrations without being part of them, the apartment he lived in was small and quiet. He had moved to the city for work, chasing a dream of independence and opportunity. The job paid enough to cover his bills and modest living, but not enough to allow for the luxuries he once imagined he would enjoy. He had friends in the city, colleagues who invited him to gatherings, but the reality was that the holidays always reminded him of what he had left behind. He missed the smell of his mother's cooking, the laughter around the dinner table, and the warmth of the home he grew up in. Messages from family reached him, but each one was a bittersweet reminder that he was miles away from the people who mattered most. As the days passed, he tried to keep himself busy. He wandered through holiday markets, listened to street musicians, and bought small gifts for neighbors in the apartment building. Each act was a tiny attempt to chase away the loneliness, but the feeling persisted. In the evenings, he would sit by the window watching the snowflakes fall silently against the streetlights. He would sip hot cocoa, trying to convince himself that the warmth of the drink could replace the warmth of home. Yet, no matter how much he tried, the emptiness lingered, gnawing at the edges of his heart. One afternoon, he decided to visit a local park. The trees were bare, their branches dusted with snow, and the paths were lined with benches. Families and friends strolled through, bundled in scarves and coats, their voices carrying laughter and conversation. He found an empty bench and sat down, his hands wrapped around his cup of coffee. He watched a young boy chase a dog, the boy's laughter ringing through the crisp air. For a moment, he allowed himself to smile at the simple joy he witnessed. But as the scene unfolded, a wave of sadness washed over him. He realized he was witnessing life's happiness from the outside. Unable to share in it fully, back at his apartment, he tried to focus on work, telling himself that he would be distracted enough not to feel the loneliness. Yet, the quiet hum of the computer and the ticking of the clock only emphasized how alone he was. He opened his laptop to check messages from family, and each notification brought both joy and sorrow. A video of his younger sister singing a Christmas carol made him laugh at first, then tears welled in his eyes. He tried to wipe them away quickly, not wanting the sadness to settle in, but it lingered like a shadow that refused to leave. He had considered buying a plane ticket home, but a quick glance at the prices made him sigh heavily. His savings were limited, barely enough to cover rent and necessities for the next month. He thought about asking his parents for help, but pride and embarrassment held him back. They had always been supportive, but he didn't want to admit that he couldn't make it home for the holidays on his own. The thought that he might spend Christmas alone felt like a weight pressing down on him, heavier with each passing day. As the night approached, he walked to a nearby street where small shops displayed holiday decorations. He stopped to watch a musician playing a violin, the notes floating softly in the chilly air. People dropped coins into the open case, smiling and nodding in appreciation. He stood there for a while, letting the music fill the emptiness inside him. For a fleeting moment, he imagined what it would be like to share this experience with someone who cared, someone who would laugh at the street performers with him, or sip cocoa by the fire. But the thought faded as he remembered he would be returning to his empty apartment alone. One evening, he received a message from a distant cousin who lived in another state. They wrote about their family gathering, sending photos of the decorated tree, the food, and the laughter. He stared at the images, his heart aching. He longed to be there, to hear the familiar voices, to feel the comfort of family traditions. Yet, he knew it was impossible. He had to remain in the city, far away from the warmth he craved. He set the phone down and stared at the ceiling, wondering if this year's Christmas would pass in silence and solitude. He tried to distract himself with cooking, attempting to make a small festive meal. The apartment filled with the scent of roasted vegetables and spices, and for a moment, he felt a tiny spark of happiness. He imagined the table set with family around it, sharing stories and laughter. But reality returned quickly, leaving him with a plate for one and the echo of the imagined voices in his mind. He ate quietly, his thoughts drifting between hope and disappointment. Late at night, he bundled himself in a blanket and settled near the window. The city lights twinkled like distant stars, and snow continued to fall softly on the streets below. He whispered to himself, admitting that he felt lonely, that he missed home more than he had anticipated. Tears slipped silently down his cheeks, and he allowed himself to feel the full weight of his emotions. He realized that it was okay to feel sadness, that acknowledging his loneliness was a part of being human. As he drifted to sleep, he imagined what Christmas morning would be like at home. The smell of fresh bread, the crackle of the fireplace, the laughter of his family echoing through the house. He pictured himself sitting at the table, sharing stories and feeling the warmth he had longed for. Yet the reality of the empty apartment around him reminded him that this vision might remain a dream. He curled into the blanket, holding on to the hope that perhaps, in some unexpected way, this Christmas might surprise him. Days passed slowly, each one blending into the next. He continued his routine, going to work, walking through the streets, and observing the celebrations around him. The loneliness was a constant companion, but he carried it quietly, trying not to let it overwhelm him. He found small joys where he could, a smile from a stranger, the glow of lights in a shop window, the sound of carolers in the distance. These moments were brief, fleeting, but they reminded him that even in solitude, beauty and kindness still existed in the world. He thought about reaching out to friends, perhaps asking to join their celebrations, but he hesitated, afraid of imposing or feeling like an outsider. The fear of rejection and disappointment kept him in his apartment most evenings, wrapped in blankets and memories of home. The city outside buzzed with life and cheer, yet he felt like a spectator, watching others experience happiness while he remained on the sidelines. One afternoon, as he walked past a small cafe, he noticed a group of volunteers handing out warm drinks and meals to those in need. He paused, watching quietly, feeling a mix of admiration and longing. The generosity and kindness on display stirred something within him, a reminder that even in a world where he felt alone, acts of care and connection existed. He smiled faintly, wishing he could be part of something like that. Even in a small way, as Christmas Eve approached, his anxiety grew. He had accepted the reality that he would not be going home. But the thought of spending the night alone, without the laughter and warmth of family, was heavy on his heart. He tried to prepare himself, focusing on work and small distractions, but the silence of the apartment was deafening. He wrapped gifts he had bought for his neighbors, hoping to bring a little cheer to others even if he could not share it himself. On the night before Christmas, he sat by the window once more, sipping tea and watching the snow blanket the city. He whispered a quiet wish to himself, hoping for something miraculous, something that could change the course of his lonely holiday. He did not know what form it might take, but the act of hoping brought a small spark of light into his heart. The city outside glittered with lights and joy, and for the first time in days, he felt a fragile sense of anticipation, not knowing what would happen, but secretly daring to believe that, perhaps, just perhaps, his Christmas might not be as lonely as he feared. He woke up the next morning with a heaviness in his chest. The day ahead felt long, but he tried to shake off the gloom. He put on his coat, wrapped a scarf around his neck, and headed outside, hoping that the cold air might clear his mind. The streets were busy, full of people who seemed too focused on the joy around them to notice anyone else. He walked past crowded cafes, where friends laughed over coffee, families taking pictures in front of decorated trees, and children playing in the snow. Everywhere he looked, life seemed to carry on without him, and the pang of loneliness settled deep inside. He decided to go to the library, hoping for a quiet place to distract himself. The warm air and the smell of old books brought him a small comfort. He wandered through the aisles, scanning titles, letting his mind drift. He picked up a book of short stories and read a few pages, but the words failed to fully capture his attention. His thoughts kept drifting home, to his family, to the meals they shared, the laughter. and even the small arguments that seemed so trivial now. He realized that no distraction, no matter how engaging, could fully erase the longing he felt. After the library, he wandered into a small market square. Street performers played music, and vendors sold handmade ornaments and treats. He watched a juggler for a while, clapping politely along with the crowd, but it all felt distant. He bought a small pastry, hoping the sweetness might lift his spirits, and sat on a bench watching people pass by. He noticed the smiles and greetings exchanged, the hugs shared, and it reminded him of what he was missing. The warmth of connection was something he could not replicate alone. He thought about reaching out to a coworker, someone he had seen around the office, but never really talked to outside of work. He typed a message inviting them for coffee, then hesitated and deleted it. Pride and fear of rejection held him back. The truth was, he was hungry for connection, but he did not want to appear needy or desperate. So, he kept walking, pretending he was fine, while inside, his heart ached. At work, the day dragged. Everyone seemed distracted by the approaching holidays, chatting about plans, parties, and gifts. He smiled politely when asked, but he could not bring himself to join in the conversation. Each comment about home made his chest tighten, reminding him of the distance that separated him from the life he longed for. He tried to focus on his tasks, but even the simplest assignments felt heavy, weighed down by the thoughts of what he could not have. During lunch, he went to a nearby park. Snow had started falling lightly, covering benches and pathways in a delicate white blanket. He sat on a bench and watched a small group of children building a snowman. Their laughter was bright and clear, cutting through the cold air. He smiled, remembering similar moments from his own childhood, but the memory brought a bittersweet ache rather than comfort. He realized that while he could remember joy, he could not recreate it here, not fully. In the afternoon, he decided to take a walk to clear his mind. He wandered through narrow streets, past small shops with colorful decorations, the smell of baked goods and roasted chestnuts filling the air. He watched couples pass by hand in hand and felt the sting of his own solitude. Yet, amidst the sadness, he noticed small acts of kindness. A stranger helping an elderly person carry groceries, a child offering a flower to a parent, a man giving a warm coat to someone who needed it. These moments were fleeting, but they reminded him that even in his loneliness, the world was not without compassion. He returned to his apartment in the evening, hoping the quiet would allow him to process his emotions. He sat on the couch, staring at the lights he had strung on the windowsill. They twinkled softly, reflecting in the glass, and for a moment he imagined they were stars lighting the way home. He picked up his phone again, scrolling through messages from family and friends. A photo of his parents decorating the Christmas tree made him laugh softly, then sigh. He wanted to be there with them, to participate in the simple joys of family traditions, but the reality was inescapable. The thought of buying a plane ticket home returned to his mind. He opened the airline website, checking prices, hoping for some miracle deal. The numbers made him groan. Tickets were far beyond what he could afford. He stared at the screen, feeling a mixture of frustration, disappointment, and sadness. It seemed that no matter what he did, he would have to accept spending the holiday alone. He closed the laptop and sat in silence, the weight of the situation pressing down on him later that night. He tried to cook a small meal to comfort himself. He chopped vegetables, heated a simple sauce, and set the table for one. The apartment was quiet, the only sounds being the bubbling of the pan and the occasional gust of wind outside. He ate slowly, savoring the flavors, but the silence around him was a constant reminder of what he was missing. The warmth of food was comforting, but it could not replace the warmth of family, of connection, of laughter shared across a table. He thought about the people he had met in the city, colleagues and acquaintances who seemed friendly but distant. He wished he had someone to talk to, someone who might understand the emptiness he felt. He considered reaching out to a local community group or volunteering, but he hesitated. The thought of putting himself out there, of risking rejection or awkwardness, made him retreat further into his solitude. That night, he sat by the window, wrapped in a blanket, and stared at the falling snow. The city lights reflected off the snow, creating a magical glow, but it only served to deepen his sense of isolation. He whispered quietly to himself, admitting that he felt lonely, that he missed home more than he could put into words. He thought about how different this Christmas was from the ones he remembered as a child. And a quiet sadness settled in his heart. He tried to distract himself by writing in a journal. He wrote about his feelings, his hopes, and the memories of home. The act of writing was soothing, allowing him to put words to emotions that were otherwise hard to express. Yet, even as he wrote, he knew that the emptiness would not disappear. The longing for connection and family was too deep, too real to be erased by words on paper. As the night wore on, he felt a mixture of despair and hope. He had accepted that he might be alone for the holiday. Yet a small part of him held on to the possibility that something unexpected could change his circumstances. He imagined, perhaps foolishly, that someone might reach out to him, that a miracle of some kind might occur. The thought brought a fragile warmth to his heart, a light flickering in the darkness of his loneliness. The days continued to pass slowly, each one marked by routine and quiet reflection. He walked the streets, observed the celebrations around him, and carried his loneliness like a silent companion. Yet amidst the sadness, he began to notice the small moments of joy that existed even in solitude. A kind word from a stranger, the beauty of a decorated shop window, the sound of carolers singing in the distance. These moments, though brief, reminded him that life still held small surprises and gentle comforts. Even when he felt disconnected from the world one morning, he received a message from a stranger online. Someone who had seen a post he had made about feeling alone during the holidays. The message was simple, offering words of encouragement and support. He read it carefully, a smile spreading across his face for the first time in days. The thought that someone, even a stranger, cared enough to reach out touched him deeply. It was a small gesture, but it reminded him that kindness could come from unexpected places, and that even in loneliness, connection was possible. He carried this small spark of hope with him as he continued through his day. He visited a local charity, volunteering to help distribute food and warm drinks to those in need. The act of helping others brought a sense of purpose and fulfillment he had not felt in weeks. He laughed with other volunteers, shared stories, and felt a fleeting sense of belonging. For a moment, the loneliness that had weighed so heavily on him seemed to lift, replaced by a quiet satisfaction in contributing to the well-being of others. That evening, he returned to his apartment feeling exhausted but content. He reflected on the day, realizing that while he was still far from home, he had found ways to connect and bring joy, both to himself and to others. The loneliness was still present, but it no longer felt insurmountable. He wrapped himself in a blanket, looking out the window at the falling snow, and allowed himself to dream of what the next days might bring. Perhaps, he thought, there was still hope for something extraordinary to happen. Something that could change his Christmas in ways he had never imagined. The next morning, he woke up with the familiar heaviness pressing on his chest. The city outside was covered in a thin layer of frost, and the cold light of dawn filtered through the blinds. He dressed quickly, feeling restless, and decided to go for a walk. He needed to clear his mind, to distract himself from the thoughts of loneliness that seemed to creep into every corner of his life. As he walked, he noticed the city moving with its usual rhythm, his people rushing to work, cars honking, and the distant hum of traffic. Everything seemed the same, yet his heart felt different, carrying a mixture of hope and anxiety. During the walk, he noticed a small cafe tucked into a side street, its windows frosted with condensation. A sign outside read "Warm drinks for cold days." Curious, he stepped inside. The aroma of fresh coffee and baked goods enveloped him, and the warmth of the room was a welcome relief from the winter chill. The cafe was busy, but there were a few empty seats. He found one by the window and ordered a cup of cocoa. As he waited, he noticed a small notice board near the counter filled with handwritten messages and announcements. One caught his eye, a flyer offering assistance for people needing help to get home for the holidays. He smiled faintly, not thinking much of it, assuming it was meant for those in dire situations, which did not quite fit his own circumstances. He sipped his cocoa, letting the warmth flow through him. As he watched people come and go, he thought about how fragile life could be, how kindness could appear unexpectedly, and how small gestures could make a big difference. He felt a quiet stirring inside, a small sense that perhaps the world was not as indifferent as it had seemed. He left the cafe, carrying the warmth of the moment with him, and continued walking through the city streets. Back at his apartment, he opened his laptop, checking emails and messages. One notification made him pause. It was an email from an address he didn't recognize. The subject line read, "A gift for your holiday journey." His heart skipped a beat, a strange mix of curiosity and disbelief washing over him. He hesitated before opening it, unsure if it was a mistake or some kind of spam. The email was polite, simple, and direct. It stated that his flight home for Christmas had been purchased and that he should check the attached ticket confirmation. He stared at the screen, unable to believe what he was reading. His mind raced, trying to process the unexpected turn of events. At first, he thought it must be a mistake. How could someone know about his situation? How could anyone reach out to help a stranger in such a personal way? He refreshed the email, checked the sender's address again, and even called the airline to verify the ticket. Everything was real. His flight was booked, his seat confirmed, and the details accurate. He sank into his chair, a mixture of shock, disbelief, and overwhelming gratitude flooding him. He could hardly believe that in a matter of moments his lonely Christmas could transform into a reunion with his family. He spent the next few hours trying to make sense of the situation. Who could have done this? Why would a stranger, a complete unknown, offer such generosity? He thought about the flyer he had seen at the cafe, wondering if somehow it was connected. Yet he knew that even if it was, the kindness of someone going out of their way to make this happen was extraordinary. He felt a rush of emotions: relief, joy, gratitude, and a lingering sense of awe. The thought of seeing his family again filled him with a warmth he had not felt in weeks. He called his parents first, unable to contain his excitement. Their voices on the other end were filled with surprise, then laughter, then tears. He explained what had happened, how a stranger had purchased his flight, and how he would finally be home for Christmas. They were overjoyed, their words filled with love and disbelief at the extraordinary gesture. He felt tears streaming down his face, a mix of happiness and gratitude so intense it left him speechless. The loneliness that had weighed so heavily on him seemed to vanish, replaced by a deep sense of connection and hope. As he prepared for the trip, he packed his bag carefully, making sure to include gifts for his family and a few personal items. Each item he placed in the suitcase carried meaning, a small token of the love he had for those waiting at home. He made lists, double-checked tickets, and mapped out his journey. But his mind kept returning to the stranger who had made it all possible. He felt a deep desire to understand who they were, to express his gratitude in some meaningful way, though he knew the act might have been meant to remain anonymous. The next day, he arrived at the airport, his heart racing with anticipation. The hustle and bustle of travelers, the announcements over the loudspeakers, and the scent of coffee and luggage all mixed into a chaotic symphony that somehow felt comforting. He approached the check-in counter, his ticket in hand, and confirmed his details. Everything was smooth, the process seamless, as if the universe itself was conspiring to make his journey as easy as possible. As he waited for boarding, he found a quiet corner near a window, watching planes take off and land. The thought that someone, somewhere, had made this possible for him filled him with a profound sense of wonder. He reflected on the past weeks, the loneliness, the small joys, and the unexpected moments of connection. He realized that even in the darkest times, life had a way of surprising you, of offering hope when it seemed impossible. He closed his eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath, and allowed himself to feel the full weight of gratitude on the plane. He settled into his seat, feeling the soft hum of the engines beneath him. He watched the city shrink beneath the wings, the lights of streets and buildings fading into the distance. Memories of home came rushing back, childhood holidays, family traditions, and the comforting routines he had longed for. The flight, once a daunting prospect he could not afford, now felt like a journey filled with promise, each mile bringing him closer to the warmth and love he had missed so much. During the flight, he struck up conversations with a few fellow passengers. Some were traveling for the holidays, others for work, but all seemed caught in their own worlds, their own stories. He shared a smile here, a polite conversation there, but his mind kept drifting to home. The act of flying, of moving through the clouds toward something he had yearned for, became symbolic of his journey not just in distance, but in emotion. He was leaving behind the loneliness, the quiet struggles, and moving toward connection. Warmth and joy. Hours passed and the plane began its descent. He looked out the window as the landscape below came into focus. Its familiar streets, neighborhoods, and buildings he had not seen for months. His heart raced as he realized how close he was to the people he loved. The anticipation was almost unbearable, but it was sweet in its intensity. He clutched the armrest, feeling the turbulence of both the plane and his own emotions. The thought of finally stepping off the plane into the embrace of his family filled him with a joy so pure it left him breathless. Finally, the plane landed, and he made his way through the airport. The announcements, the crowd, the rolling suitcases all felt like part of a grand stage, preparing for the final act. As he walked toward the exit, he saw his family waiting, faces glowing with excitement and relief. Their arms opened wide, and he ran into their embrace, tears streaming freely. The warmth, the laughter, and the love he had missed for so long enveloped him completely. In that moment, all the loneliness, the waiting, and the longing melted away, replaced by a profound sense of belonging and happiness. He thought about the stranger who had made this possible. The billionaire, or a philanthropist who had quietly purchased his ticket without expecting anything in return. He felt a deep gratitude, a desire to honor their kindness through his actions and outlook on life. He knew that Christmas had become more than just a family reunion. It had become a reminder of the power of generosity, the impact of small acts of kindness, and the beauty of human connection. As he sat down with his family that evening, sharing stories and laughter, he carried with him a sense of wonder and hope, knowing that sometimes miracles arrive when least expected, transforming loneliness into joy and giving the heart a reason to believe in the goodness of the world. He woke up early that morning, excitement and nervous energy coursing through him. Today was the day he would finally travel home, the day that had seemed impossible just a week ago. He dressed carefully, making sure he had everything he would need for the journey. Each item he packed felt symbolic, a small connection to home, a way to carry love and memory across the miles. He double-checked his ticket, his ID, and the small gifts he had prepared. The thought of seeing his family, of finally sitting around the Christmas tree, filled him with a warmth that chased away the remnants of loneliness. The streets were quiet as he left his apartment, the winter morning air crisp and invigorating. Snow had begun to fall overnight, coating the sidewalks and streets in a pristine white blanket. He walked briskly toward the airport, his footsteps muffled by the fresh snow. The city, usually so loud and bustling, felt calm and peaceful, as if it too knew the importance of the day. He breathed deeply, letting the cold air fill his lungs, feeling both grounded and light at the same time. At the airport, he navigated the check-in lines with ease. The airline staff were friendly, welcoming him with smiles that made the experience feel personal rather than mechanical. Each step of the process brought him closer to home, closer to the warmth and love he had been longing for. He found himself smiling at strangers, feeling a lightness in his chest that had been absent for so long. For the first time in weeks, he felt truly alive, his spirit lifted by the anticipation of reunion. While waiting at the gate, he looked around at the other travelers. Families chatted excitedly. Children pressed their faces against the windows to watch planes take off, and couples held hands tightly. He felt a pang of longing, remembering similar moments from his own family travels in the past. Yet this time, the feeling was different. Instead of loneliness, he felt a deep sense of hope and gratitude. He was about to join his own family, to experience once again the simple joys that had seemed so distant. The boarding call arrived, and he walked down the jet bridge with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. As he settled into his seat, he could feel his heart racing. The engines roared to life, and the plane began to taxi down the runway. He glanced out the window as the city lights faded, and the familiar streets he had walked every day disappeared beneath him. The sense of leaving behind the loneliness and uncertainty for something warmer, brighter, and filled with love, was overwhelming. He closed his eyes for a moment, imagining the faces of his family waiting for him at the airport, the sound of laughter, and the smell of home. During the flight, he allowed himself to reflect on the past weeks. The loneliness, the quiet evenings, the longing for home, all of it had led him to this moment. He thought about the small acts of kindness he had witnessed, the messages from strangers, and the mysterious generosity that had made his trip possible. It was a reminder that even in difficult times, the world was capable of incredible compassion. He resolved to carry this lesson with him, to remember the power of kindness and the importance of human connection. He looked around at his fellow passengers, seeing snippets of their stories through their conversations and expressions. Some were traveling to be with loved ones, others for work, but all seemed caught up in their own experiences. He smiled at a young woman sitting across the aisle, who returned it with a shy nod. In that small exchange, he felt a connection, a reminder that human warmth existed everywhere, even among strangers. The plane climbed higher, and he pressed his forehead against the window, watching the clouds drift beneath him. The vast sky seemed to echo the enormity of the journey he was on, both physically and emotionally. Hours passed. He found himself growing more excited with each passing minute. The anticipation of reunion made the time both fly and crawl. He imagined stepping off the plane, seeing the familiar airport, and then finally the smiling faces of his family. He pictured the embrace of his parents, the excited chatter of siblings, and the comforting presence of home. Each thought brought a smile to his face and a warmth to his heart that no winter chill could diminish. As the plane began its descent, he felt a rush of adrenaline and emotion. The city below slowly came into view. Streets and buildings familiar yet somehow different through the eyes of someone who had been away. Snow-dusted rooftops and the glimmering lights of houses created a picture of warmth and welcome. His heart pounded as he realized how close he was to the people he loved, the place that had always felt like home. The plane touched down smoothly, and a cheer went up among some of the passengers, though he barely noticed. His focus was entirely on the next steps. The final approach to reunion. Navigating the airport was a blur of motion and noise. He followed the signs, collected his luggage, and moved through the crowd, searching for the familiar faces he had been longing to see. Then he saw them. His family was standing together, eyes scanning the crowd, faces bright with anticipation. The moment he spotted them, his heart leapt, and tears welled up in his eyes. He broke into a run, the distance between them disappearing in an instant. They embraced him tightly, and for a long moment nothing else existed. The loneliness of the past weeks melted away, replaced by the warmth and love he had missed so profoundly. They led him out of the airport, the cold air bracing against his face, but he barely noticed. The laughter, chatter, and shared stories filled the space between them, creating a cocoon of joy and comfort. Each hug, each word, and each smile reinforced the reality of the moment. He was home. The journey that had seemed impossible, made possible by an act of extraordinary kindness, had brought him back to where he belonged. The sense of gratitude he felt was overwhelming, a mix of relief, joy, and awe at the generosity that had made this possible. That evening, he settled into his childhood home, the familiar surroundings bringing a deep sense of peace. The smell of home-cooked meals, the twinkle of lights on the Christmas tree, and the sound of family laughter created a perfect, almost magical atmosphere. He shared the story of how he had come to be there, the mysterious generosity that had allowed him to travel home. His family listened in amazement, expressing their own gratitude and disbelief. The story added an extra layer of warmth to the holiday, a reminder of how kindness could change lives in unexpected ways. As the night unfolded, he reflected on the past weeks. The loneliness, the quiet reflections, and the small moments of hope had all led him to this moment of reunion and joy. He realized that while life could be challenging and isolating, it also had a way of surprising you, of bringing warmth and connection when it was needed most. The experience left him with a renewed sense of faith in humanity, a belief that even strangers could impact lives in profound and meaningful ways. He spent the evening surrounded by family, sharing stories, laughing, and enjoying the simple pleasures of being together, he felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Knowing that the holiday he had feared would be lonely had become a memory he would cherish forever. The gift of being home, of experiencing love and connection, was more valuable than anything he could have imagined. And as he lay down to sleep that night, the warmth of family and the joy of Christmas filled his heart completely, leaving no room for the loneliness that had once seemed so insurmountable. The house was filled with warmth, laughter, and the comforting aroma of holiday food. He felt the tension of the past weeks finally ease as he sank into the familiar chaos of family life. Each hug, each story, and each laugh reminded him why he had longed for home so much. The Christmas tree sparkled in the corner, ornaments reflecting the soft glow of the lights, while plates of food covered the table, inviting everyone to share in the meal. The sense of belonging he had missed for so long wrapped around him like a comforting blanket. As the evening went on, he shared the story of how his flight home had come to be. His family listened intently, eyes wide with wonder, mouths open in disbelief. He explained the mysterious generosity, the anonymous gesture that had transformed what seemed like a lonely Christmas into this moment of joy. They asked countless questions, speculating about the identity of the benefactor. But all he could do was smile, feeling the deep gratitude that words could not fully capture. The kindness of a stranger had turned his world upside down in the most beautiful way. After the meal, they gathered around the tree to exchange gifts. He handed out the presents he had brought, each chosen with thought and care. The joy on the faces of his family members, the excitement in their voices, made his heart swell. When it was his turn to receive gifts, he felt the love behind each one, the thoughtfulness of people who knew him best. Yet, in the back of his mind, he kept thinking of the stranger who had given him the greatest gift of all, home. The magnitude of that act left him speechless, and he silently promised himself he would find a way to pay the kindness forward someday, later that night. After the house had quieted and everyone had retreated to their rooms, he stepped outside for a moment. The snow was falling gently, covering the world in a soft white blanket. He looked up at the stars, feeling a profound sense of gratitude and wonder. The journey that had begun with loneliness, longing, and uncertainty had led him to a moment of connection, love, and joy. He whispered a quiet thanks to the unknown benefactor, wishing he could express his gratitude in person, but feeling content in knowing that their generosity had changed his life in ways that would never be forgotten. The next morning, he woke to the sound of carolers outside and the smell of fresh-baked bread. The holiday spirit was alive and vibrant, when he joined his family in preparing breakfast, helping with small tasks, and sharing stories from his time away. Every conversation, every laugh, and every shared memory reinforced the sense of belonging that he had missed for so long. The past weeks of solitude and longing felt like a distant memory, replaced by the warmth and comfort of home. Throughout the day, he reflected on how fragile and precious human connections were. He thought about the kindness of the stranger who had made his trip home possible, the small acts of compassion he had witnessed in the city, and the moments of connection that had lifted his spirits, even in times of loneliness. He realized that these gestures, whether grand or small, had the power to change lives in profound ways. The experience taught him that generosity and empathy were forces that could create miracles, turning despair into joy and transforming ordinary days into unforgettable memories. He spent time walking through the neighborhood, admiring the decorations on houses and noticing the joy and excitement in the eyes of children playing in the snow. He thought about how the simple act of being present, of sharing time and attention, could create happiness for others. The thought inspired him to consider how he might bring the same warmth and kindness into the lives of those around him. He realized that, while he had been the recipient of extraordinary generosity, he now had the opportunity to extend it to others. Continuing the cycle of human connection and compassion, in the evening, they gathered around the fireplace, sipping hot cocoa and sharing stories of holidays past. The room was filled with laughter, warmth, and love, a stark contrast to the loneliness he had felt just days ago. He felt a deep sense of contentment, knowing that he was exactly where he belonged. The memories of solitude and longing had been replaced by the joy of family, the comfort of home, and the magic of the holiday season. Every sound, every smell, and every smile reminded him of the importance of connection, and he vowed never to take it for granted again. He thought about the stranger once more, wondering if they would ever know the impact of their generosity. The thought filled him with humility and gratitude. He knew that this Christmas would stay with him forever, not just for the reunion with his family, but for the reminder that kindness existed in the world in ways that could be life-changing. The experience gave him a renewed sense of faith in humanity, a belief that even in difficult times, unexpected blessings could appear, transforming lives and creating moments of profound joy as night fell. He took a quiet moment to himself, looking out the window at the snow-covered streets. The world outside was peaceful, the lights twinkling softly, and he felt a deep sense of connection to everything around him. The journey from loneliness to reunion, from uncertainty to joy, had been remarkable. He realized that Christmas was more than just gifts or decorations. It was about love, compassion, and the extraordinary impact that human kindness could have on a single life. In the following days, he spent time reflecting on the lessons he had learned. The experience had taught him the value of gratitude, the importance of noticing the small acts of kindness in everyday life, and the power of generosity to create miracles. He began to think about how he could share that same warmth with others, whether through volunteering, small gestures, or simply being present for someone in need. The realization filled him with purpose, a desire to continue the chain of generosity that had changed his Christmas so profoundly by the end of the holiday season. He felt transformed. The loneliness and sadness that had once seemed overwhelming were replaced by a sense of hope, connection, and gratitude. He had experienced firsthand the power of human kindness, the joy of reunion, and the magic of unexpected generosity. The memories of this Christmas would stay with him forever, a reminder that even in the darkest moments, hope could appear, and that the smallest acts of compassion could create the most extraordinary miracles. As he prepared to return to the city after the holidays, he carried with him not only gifts and memories, but a renewed spirit and a heart full of gratitude. He knew that life would continue to have its challenges, moments of loneliness and uncertainty. But he also knew that kindness existed, often in the most unexpected places. The lessons of this Christmas, the journey from solitude to connection, and the extraordinary generosity that had made it possible would remain with him, guiding his actions, his thoughts, and his interactions with others. He boarded the plane with a sense of peace and purpose, looking out the window as the familiar streets of home disappeared below. The journey ahead was no longer just a physical one. It was a journey of the heart, carrying with him the warmth, love, and lessons of a Christmas that had begun with loneliness and ended with the profound reminder that human kindness could change lives forever. He smiled, knowing that he would carry this gift with him always, and that one day he would have the opportunity to pass it on to someone else in need, continuing the cycle of generosity and love that had made his Christmas truly unforgettable. The days following Christmas were quiet but filled with a gentle warmth that seemed to linger in the house. The tree still stood, adorned with twinkling lights and ornaments, and the scent of cookies and pine remained in the air. He woke each morning feeling lighter than he had in weeks, a calm joy replacing the heavy loneliness he had carried for so long. Though the holidays had passed, the experience had left him changed, and he found himself appreciating the small things that often went unnoticed: the laughter of his younger sibling, the aroma of breakfast cooking, and the simple comfort of sitting together with family. He spent time talking with his parents about life in the city, sharing stories about the struggles and small triumphs of his days alone. They listened intently, offering advice, comfort, and encouragement. Their interest and care reminded him how important human connection was, not just during the holidays, but in every day of life. He realized that, while he had felt isolated, he had also learned the value of being open to small gestures of kindness, both giving and receiving. He reflected on how the anonymous generosity that had allowed him to come home had inspired him to notice opportunities to help others in his own way. One morning, he took a walk through the neighborhood, the snow still soft on the ground. Children played in the streets, their laughter echoing in the crisp air, and neighbors greeted each other warmly. He felt a sense of belonging he had not felt in a long time. He thought about the city where he lived now and how lonely it had felt, realizing that the connection to others, even small interactions, was what made life meaningful. Each smile he shared with a passerby, each nod of acknowledgement, reminded him that kindness could be found anywhere, if one looked for it. He decided to volunteer at a local shelter for a few days. Inspired by the generosity that had touched his own life, helping to prepare meals, distribute warm clothing, speak kindly to those in need, brought him a profound sense of satisfaction. The act of giving, even in small ways, made him realize that kindness was not just about grand gestures, but also about being present for others, offering comfort and attention when it mattered most. He met people who had stories of hardship and resilience, and each encounter reminded him of the importance of empathy and understanding. Back at home, evenings were spent in conversation and reflection. He shared moments of his life in the city, the challenges he faced, and the moments of hope that had kept him going. His family listened, asking questions, laughing at some of his experiences, and empathizing with his struggles. The exchange reminded him of the power of storytelling, of how sharing experiences could create bonds and understanding. He realized that everyone carried their own burdens, and by connecting through these stories, people could bring comfort and strength to one another. He also found time to focus on personal projects he had left unfinished. Small hobbies and creative pursuits that gave him joy. Painting, reading, and writing became ways to process his experiences and emotions. He found that expressing himself through these outlets helped him make sense of the past weeks, turning the challenges and loneliness into lessons and reflections that would stay with him long after the holidays. The creative time became a balance to the busyness of family life, quiet space to understand himself more deeply. The city, too, remained in his thoughts. He began planning how to return, now with a renewed sense of purpose and hope. He thought about ways to cultivate connections there, to avoid the loneliness he had felt during the holidays. He considered joining community groups, volunteering, and reaching out to friends more often. The experience had taught him that being proactive in seeking connection and offering kindness could prevent the isolation that had once seemed unavoidable. He realized that the lessons of the holiday were not confined to a single season, but were applicable every day of life. One afternoon, he walked to a nearby park where he had spent many lonely days before. The memories of watching families and couples had once made him feel left out and invisible. Now, he observed the same scene with a different perspective. He noticed small acts of kindness, parents helping children, strangers sharing smiles, and dogs playing happily with their owners. These moments brought him joy instead of sadness. He realized that he no longer saw himself as an outsider, but as someone connected to a larger human experience, able to appreciate the beauty of life even when it was not directly centered on him. He began thinking about how to share his story. The experience of receiving unexpected generosity and returning home for Christmas had been life-changing. He wanted others to understand the impact of small, thoughtful acts. Perhaps he could write about it, or speak to local groups, or simply share the story in conversation. The idea of inspiring others to offer kindness, even in small ways, became an important goal. He understood that generosity was contagious, and by sharing his experience, he could encourage others to act with compassion. As he spent time with his family, he also reflected on the value of gratitude. Each day, he found something to appreciate. The laughter of his siblings, a warm meal, a kind word, or a moment of quiet peace. Gratitude became a way to focus on the positive, to acknowledge the goodness in life, and to maintain the emotional balance he had discovered over the holidays. He realized that this practice could help him in the city as well, keeping him connected to the joy that existed even in small, everyday moments. In the evenings, he sometimes stepped outside to look at the stars, just as he had on the night before Christmas. The vastness of the sky reminded him of the endless possibilities life could offer, and the brightness of each star felt like a symbol of hope and connection. He reflected on how one act of kindness had changed his life, how it had shifted his perspective, and how it had inspired him to be more compassionate toward others. The experience had left an indelible mark, a lesson in humility, gratitude, empathy. He also thought about the stranger who had made his journey home possible. Though he may never meet them, their generosity had set a powerful example. He considered how he could honor that act by being more mindful of the needs of others, by noticing when someone was struggling, and by offering help without expectation. The realization that simple acts could have extraordinary consequences motivated him to live with greater awareness and intention. He understood that kindness was not just a gift to others, but a source of profound fulfillment for oneself. As the days passed, he returned to the city with a renewed heart and spirit. The loneliness he had once feared now felt manageable because he carried the lessons of the holidays with him. He began to cultivate a community around himself, offering help, being present for friends and neighbors, and sharing moments of joy wherever possible. The experience of being given such a remarkable gift had transformed him, making him more sensitive, compassionate, and aware of the impact one person could have on another. He realized that life was full of opportunities to give and receive kindness, and that embracing them could make even ordinary days meaningful.